Hello, my fellow movie fans, and welcome to another episode of A Feast of Films Theatre with your hosts, Matthew Ayalew and Ethan R. Hill. How's that? That was good?
Yeah. Classic. Classic.
Hello, my fellow movie fans, and welcome to another episode of A Feast of Films. I am Ethan R. Hill, and with me, as always, is...
Matt Ayalew. What's going on, people? What is going on?
Oh, you know.
What is going on?
Same old, same old. Still haven't moved. Still ramping up for that. All that fun stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Next episode will be in a different space.
Cool.
It's gonna be weird. It's gonna be very weird.
I'll still be here, though.
Yeah, I won't be. I don't even know what it's gonna look like. It's gonna be weird. I might not even have it set up. Maybe it'll just be this one computer on a desk in an empty room.
Just very quiet.
Yep.
Or lots of echo.
Just so much reverb.
Hello. Just the whole time. Just get feedback. What the hell?
So Matt, what are we talking about this week? This is kind of
Well, don't sound too excited about it.
Well, I
like,
don't know much about what you want to talk. You don't know
our first. I'm just saying, like, our first episode's like dressy browser, and then we're just like, this episode's like, yeah, bro, what's going on, man?
Matt, you're ruining.
I'm moving to a new place.
Matt, you're ruining the magic. They don't know that we recorded on the same day, do they?
Yeah, we've only mentioned it.
I don't know what you're talking about. I've never mentioned that before in my life.
I haven't moved yet. I was like, well, that tracks. Seeing that would have been very. Just, see ya. Oh, yeah, okay.
Matt, it's called the art of misdirection. It's illusions. Hand
I feel like the
movements.
cat is out of the bag when you tell people how the illusion works.
No, it's okay.
Depends what episode you've watched.
Exactly. For all we know, this is a new. Yeah. For all we know, this is a new person, and you've ruined the magic for this new person.
I'm sorry.
It's like it would be like your first trip to Disneyland. We take you backstage and show you Winnie the Pooh with his head off.
I'd like to see that.
As a child, as a 5-year-old child.
Yes.
I mean that's fair.
Yes.
You want to see a beheaded Winnie the Pooh?
Yeah, sure. I don't know.
That's horrible. Matt, are you okay? Are you hurt?
No.
Are you all right?
Yes.
Who
hurt you?
You need a hug.
Who hurt you? Winnie the freaking Pooh.
Deep in the 100-acre woods.
Where Christopher Robin plays. Wow, that's disturbing.
There lives an enchanted neighborhood. I want to say there's actually a theory.
Winnie the Pooh's hilarious.
I want to say there's a theory where it's like it's actually like how Christopher Robin breaks down and translates different emotions as his different
characters.
His different characters reflect different mental issues. Other one too I've also heard.
Yeah, I've seen that one too.
The 7 Deadly Sins or something like that too. Like every character is a sin. Oh. Because you have like gluttony, sloth.
I heard more of the personality.
Yeah, the personality ones is like the bigger one and like
different personality elements. Yeah,
like that's dark. Especially like man, like
why can't people just let people be kids' films? Like we're just like let's dissect this and ruin this for everybody.
Because it's like like what Taika Waititi said, where it's like you don't make something with a message in it, and then some pretentious film student comes along and says, yes, this is about loyalty, and you're like, yes, that's what my film was about this whole time.
Yeah,
and it's the same thing with kids media. Half the time, it's like, all right, let's make a fun film about this boy and his stuffed animals that come to life. And then people are like, the author was actually using this to tell a deeper story with deeper meanings. And sometimes they are, but most of the time, no, they're not. Most of the time, it's like...
That's what I always felt like in school. When they're like, this is the deeper meaning of this. And I was like, are you sure this isn't just about a bird? Like, it seems like it's just about a bird.
Yeah, it's a metaphor for the struggles of mankind. My favorite,
especially like when the author's like long gone and dead and shit, like hundreds of years, and you're just like, this is what he meant. Like, have you talked to him? Like, have you talked to him?
My friend,
this seems like a pretty like, seems like a pretty quick jump from like bird to like the structure of society.
my friend gave me my friend gave me my favorite answer to that whenever someone's like acting like that is we as a household will pull out, oh yes, it's about the duality of man, and we'll say
Yeah.
that all the time, and like no one knows what we're talking about. No one, like, everyone's like, are you stupid, like what is this about? And it's like, what's great is when it actually is about the duality of man, and we pull that out and they're like, oh
And they're just
yes,
like, yes,
yeah, it
yes.
really is. And it's like, oh, we were just saying words, we don't actually know.
You pretentious dick.
I like dissecting films. I love dissecting films. That is why I'm here. But there's a line where it's like, I'm dissecting and think this is my opinion versus I'm dissecting, and if you don't think that if you don't agree on my opinion, you're the worst. Like that's
You're an uneducated smuck.
it's almost like you can interpret things differently.
Yeah, strange.
Speaking of different interpretations, video games are different interpretations of stories too. See, Matt, I'm getting better at these natural segues without being awkward or weird.
That was weird.
It wasn't weird.
That was weird.
No, you're just saying it's weird because you're mean. How dare you?
Well, anyway, yes, we are talking about video game films today.
Oh, sure,
We
just,
thought it'd be
just
a
hopping away
fun
from my
little,
hurt feelings.
Fun little, yeah, we're moving the hell along, man. We're not getting stuck in that.
No, I'm sad.
Oh, why don't you just go hang out in the 100-acre woods there?
Go hang out at the 100-acre woods.
Yeah, like Eeyore and stuff. You know, you're all sad. Y'all can just like hang out. Should be fun.
Go-
Pin a tail on a donkey.
I don't know. I don't know if I want to do that.
Mother.
I don't know if I want to go and like. He's miserable enough. Do you think I need to keep like poking him in the butt with a nail?
He could poke you.
Matt, I feel you get really kind of randy around this time.
I was like, I said it, and I was like, that's not what I meant.
But it's not what it's not about what it meant. It's what it sounded like.
Yeah.
Breaking news: Matthew Ayalew wants Ethan Hill to get poked by Eeyore. Man, that puts Facebook poking in a completely different context for me now.
Yeah, I know, right? Oh man. Okay.
Remember Poking Wars? Remember
Yeah, I remember
all
that being a thing.
nonsense?
Ridiculous.
Gosh, why were we so dumb?
Oh man, humanity. It doesn't get better. It doesn't get better.
We're like,
Remember when we thought adults had it all together? Now we're just like, you guys were just making this shit up the whole time, weren't you? Like, yeah.
You mean they lied?
Yeah, exactly, right? Oh man.
It's,
Oh man. Anyway, video games, films, moving away from Eeyore and your sadness. We'll just keep moving along. Yeah, we're talking about video game films because honestly, when it comes to films, clearly it seems like one of the biggest struggles for adaptations is video games. Used to be comics. Now they got a pretty good handle on it for the most part. Some that come out are absolutely horrendous. Some that come out are just not really true to, you know, the comic book characters themselves. Like I think we can agree
like the
Fan
Dark
4's
Knight, yeah.
stick was just like, bro.
yeah, The Dark Knight was pretty terrible as an adaptation of Batman.
I don't know what you're talking about, man. The Dark Knight was your masterpiece.
Dark
It
Knight
was
is
your masterpiece,
brilliant.
man. It was brilliant. It was a masterpiece,
The
okay?
Dark Knight is a brilliant film.
It is brilliant. But, you know, so there's different adaptations and stuff, too. But overall, comic books, films have gone generally better at being adapted on a more consistent basis. You know, novels, there's even that struggle of doing that. Like, adapting a story from one medium to another is a really, really tough thing. Just in general, but it kind of with video games, it seems to be just a little bit more of a struggle
You know when it was
for the majority of films.
You know what was actually pretty good at when adaptations of books were actually pretty well done? It's when they didn't advertise that they were adaptations of books, when they're just like, hey,
Yeah, so people couldn't go
here's
read
a
them.
random movie. Like, well,
Yeah.
Jaws. There was Jaws, there was
Jurassic
The
Park.
Godfather, and it was like,
Yeah, Godfather,
like,
yeah.
I don't think they were like overtly advertised as like based on the novel of, like,
Right.
because it took me, and maybe maybe it was because I wasn't around when those movies came out.
Maybe it was just us.
But like growing up, I never realized most of them were novels until I became a functioning adult who actually looked into these things.
Fair enough.
But it's I think the problem with adapting video games though is they're not always as linear as stories
No, they're not.
as books or comics can be. Whereas, well, video games, and it depends because even the linear video games, a lot of times they're either too short or too long when you just put the cutscenes together. They're either not long enough to be a feature film, or they're not, or they're
Or they're way too long.
yeah, exactly, right. So it's
if you were just combining cutscenes,
so like, how do you adapt that then? And then what's the point of if you're just combining cutscenes? You've made an animated movie. What's the point of adapting that into a live action story?
And then but a lot of times you're missing out the stuff in the middle too, right?
Yeah,
With those kind of things as well. So there's like a lot of challenges there. But I think you're onto like one of the things too is I think it is because it's not so linear. Even if you do have a linear game, everyone experiences it slightly differently because it depends on what difficulty, depends if you suck or not. You know what I mean? Like there's always that level of interaction, and that's why video games are such a unique form of storytelling, just because of how interactive they are.
well, are you gonna kill
When it
every?
comes down to that kind of thing,
Are you gonna kill every enemy, or are you gonna?
or you're gonna sneak by, you're gonna
Well,
go stealth mode,
have,
right? Like
have me and Prosper talked to you about my experience playing the newest Wolfenstein game?
no, no.
So, Wolfenstein 2. I was playing it because I enjoy the Wolfenstein games, the new ones. And I was playing Wolfenstein 2, and I made it to the final boss, which is like 3 giant mechs.
Yeah.
And I'm going, and I could kill 2 of them, but I couldn't kill that third. I'd always die. And so we're playing this game, and I kill the first 2, and I'm like, okay, let's see it. Maybe I can get a better angle at fighting this guy. Maybe I can find a better vantage point.
Right.
And so I run past him and climb up a ladder, and the cutscene plays. And I beat the game by running past the final boss. And Prosser was so mad at me for it. He's like, you cheated. I'm like, I didn't know that was going to
happen. It probably shouldn't have happened. That seems to be a glitch.
No, apparently that's
they underestimated your lack of gaminess. They're just like, no one's just going to try and run past him.
I wasn't even trying to. I was just trying to get to a better angle.
That's so funny.
Because I died like 20 plus times. I'm like, I'd make it to the same final mech. And it's like, okay, no, like, fine, screw this. Maybe I'm just in the wrong place. Maybe I'm staying put too much. Because there are some of those games where, like, in order to beat a boss, you got to keep moving.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, cool. Well, I'll go over here. Oh, look, there's a ladder. Clearly, in these games, you climb ladders. I've had other levels where, I go upstairs, I go downstairs, I jump around to, like, avoid these bosses. I've done this before in this game. This makes perfect sense. I'll climb the ladder. No, and he was mad. He was very upset because he thought I cheated, and he's like, "You've never actually finished Wolfenstein 2," and I'm like, no, I finished it, just not the way that you wanted me to.
Yeah,
like, and that's a different like. But could you imagine if that was? Could you imagine if that was a movie?
You're just like, I just run past here and we're done. Yeah, just skip the final boss.
Now I kind of want to put that in a comedy of some kind. Where it's like, you will never get past me.
Just very anticlimactic, right?
Wait, what?
Just like,
where'd they go?
It's over. They just blows up. Like, they did nothing.
Nuts.
Damn it, he passed the invisible line that activates the cutscene. Now I'm screwed.
That was basically it. And it's still one of my favorite video gaming moments ever. And again, how salty Prosser was. Because he's not even here to defend himself, so I feel bad. But he's very... a lot of people should enjoy the video games that he likes the way that he likes. And he's gotten better over the years. When I first met him and the guys were very anti me playing on easy mode for games.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm a story guy. I love playing for story.
Yeah, I'm not here you're not here for like the difficulty aspect.
I'll do that on my second playthrough. I'll up the difficulty then, but like for the first playthrough, if I'm dying every 5 seconds, I'm not going to enjoy the game. Yeah. And so for the longest time, because of that, they basically convinced me not to play video games.
They're just like,
And
forget
then
it.
eventually it got to a point, and there's certain games. Mortal Kombat, I can always start on normal. I believe Spider-Man, I started on normal. Um, Halo, we're playing on normal because I've gotten better
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
Uncharted, I played through on easy for the first few times, and that's actually what helped me become a better marksman in games.
Hmm.
Was playing on easy, and then
I love the Uncharted series.
oh,
It's so good.
it's my favorite video game franchise, which is why I'm nervous about the movie. But
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's one of those things. Just like for the longest time, Prosser was very adamant on no, you need to experience games how I experience games, and it took him a while to realize, like movies, like any piece of art, everyone's gonna explain. Everyone's gonna experience things a little
Experience
different,
it differently.
and
Yeah, and everyone has
different tastes.
different tastes. Yeah.
So it's for
Some
me.
games
It's
are not for everyone, and difficulties aren't for everyone.
well, he loves the Bloodborne series. He loves the Dark Souls series. He
Yeah.
he really gets a sense of accomplishment by getting past an impossible task.
Hmm.
I hate that. When it comes to
You're
games,
just like, nope. Yeah.
when it comes to real life, 100%, I love that feeling because if you are met with an impossible task and you
And
you
you beat
overcome
it.
come it in your real life, that's great. Because I've grown, I've changed as a person. I don't get the same sense of accomplishment from a video game because it's not
No,
it's
because
not real.
you can't like take that to the bank. You
To
know,
me,
not even necessarily take it to the bank, but like you turn off the game and like, oh, that was fun.
Yeah, what
like
what
it's
transferable
over at the
skill
end of
did
the
I
day.
get, right? Like it's like there's not really anything there. It's because it's enjoyment, it's entertainment. It's
But it's
something.
entertainment.
It
Yeah.
would be like me sitting down and like listening to a really long record. Well,
Yeah.
what did I get from that other than the enjoyment of that? Well, if I'm having to suffer through it, though, I'm not
And
actually
like
enjoying it.
and yeah, everyone gets something different from those
Yeah.
type of experiences and stuff too, right? Like, and that's okay. It's just
Oh,
yeah.
exactly, and that's not
Not
to take
everyone's
away.
gonna find that like the enjoyment in the same type of exact gameplay and
And
whatnot.
that's not to take away from his enjoyment from it. But it's again even another example with movies when people sit through 4 hour long movies and then sit there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I sat through this 4 hour long movie, and it's like, did you have fun? Well, no, but I sat through a 4 hour long movie, and it's
Well,
like,
then, like,
then
well,
why
that
did you
was
waste your time?
good
Like,
use of time. Yeah,
I could watch
exactly.
3 movies in that time. I could watch three
Yeah.
really good hour-and-a-half movies that I know I'm gonna enjoy. It's why like I started
Yeah.
Gone with the Wind, turned it off 20 minutes in because I was bored.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll watch it again at a different time, but right now it's not that time.
Move along, man. Move along.
It's why I haven't even tried the Snyder Cut because it's like I know I'm not gonna enjoy it. So
Like, why would I sit there through that?
exactly, maybe
Yeah, that's fair.
Maybe
Yeah.
in the new house when I feel like I might have more free time. I don't think I will, but I pretend moving houses is gonna give me
It's
more
gonna
free
change
time.
your life. Yeah.
Yeah, like it's gonna make a difference. But it's at the end of the day, like video gaming is an individual experience, and I think you're right trying to capture that in cinema, where cinema is still an individual experience, but it's a lot more linear
It's on
and it's a lot more
it's on a
collective.
set path, right?
Yeah.
And same with comics, same with books, right? Novels and stuff.
Minus the
Like,
closest
there's a
we have
certain-
is choose your own adventure.
Exactly, which would make it slightly different, but the rest is like pretty much a straight path. Where video games are always subjective to how the person plays, difficulty,
Yep.
what play style they want to use, and a lot of video games have different mechanics for different play styles of how people want to play.
Even
So I
within
think
the
that's
series,
one
too.
of the exactly, and I think that's one of the the elements and the things that make it difficult. I think one of the other things too, when they're adapting it. Hollywood sometimes and filmmakers like to change a lot of like the core elements,
Which doesn't make sense to me.
which doesn't make sense because here's the thing. It's like, yes, we get it. Number one, it's important when you're changing it into a different medium. You have to there are things you do have to adjust
Yeah,
to make it work in
100%.
that medium. Obviously, you can't take a 40-hour game and put it in like 2 hours and keep everything. You know what I mean? Like there's things that have to be cut for it to make sense in that medium, or the story has to be, fine lined and focused. But there's a lot of core elements that they tend to take out of video games or change them, which either A pisses off people or B totally makes them almost nonsensical because
Yeah.
it's like the person who's adjusting it doesn't have like a knowledge of the game or the universe, or sometimes why even mechanics or certain elements are in there. So they're changing them for their film because creativity and artisticness, but like it doesn't actually fit sometimes even within like the film itself or the universe that kind of,
Well,
works
it's
around it.
the newest Mortal Kombat movie was really bad for that one.
Yeah,
Like
I
it
haven't
was
seen that one.
it's fun. It's a pretty decent adaptation. The problem is they
I heard
added
it was okay if you don't think about it, kind of thing.
kind
Like,
of
don't think too hard.
they added a new character to be your main character,
Yeah,
and he didn't need to exist. You could have taken
yeah,
that actor could have played Liu Kang,
and
or
like
the actor could
super
have played
generic.
Johnny Cage.
Yeah,
And he was a good actor. He was good. Like the actor was fine. The actor is not the problem. Lewis Tan was amazing.
but the
The
character
character was
itself.
terrible. Like he was good. And that's the thing is like they could have made him Johnny Cage because they didn't cast Johnny Cage yet.
Yeah,
And you could have told the exact same story.
and it wouldn't have changed a beat. Eh?
It would have changed some plot stuff, but for the better.
Yeah,
And it's the same thing like if they would have made him Liu Kang. But like the guy that got to play Liu Kang was also really well done, but they just kind of sidelined him. Like there was a lot of weird choices in the movie.
hmm
And you could tell it was because they were Hollywoodizing this franchise. And like that didn't sit well with me. It was still fun to a point, but there were also just a lot of moments where it's like, "Okay, guys, you're missing the point of the source material here."
yeah, and I think sometimes that's one of the issues too. Um, you're missing the source material, so you end up kind of missing like the soul of the story.
Yeah.
Because I think like a lot of people too, when it comes to gaming, like it does have that kind of shadow hanging over it, or that mindset that it's this lesser form of entertainment, or it's this lesser form of storytelling, when really it is a very highly complex like it's to make a video game is arguably more complicated than to make a film,
Well,
like in a very different way, right? Like where films live action, it's like you got to create all this stuff digitally, and half the games nowadays are like making films, but you got to make it happen in this digital world. Like you got to create all that stuff from code, like out of scratch, and engines. Like
well,
it's just
and remember
it's a
too.
very complicated process nowadays.
Remember too, video games are still very, very new.
In the history
In,
of
in the,
entertainment,
like I
yeah,
think
absolutely.
the earliest video game I think showed up in the 1950s or 60s, and that was like I don't even think Pong was the first one. It was I think one of the first mass-produced ones, but like the first one showed up I think 50s or 60s, and it didn't really grow into what it is because we had arcades for a while, and then home systems didn't really take off until the 80s.
Yeah.
Like they existed, but you didn't really get the first big home consoles.
Well, the whole industry was crashing until Mario.
Yep.
Right.
And that's because again, it was just a fun little toy. Again, it was a toy,
Yeah.
and then it became a complete industry. So if you want to even look at like
And its own art form.
if you
For
want to
sure,
try and
like,
compare that
Own
to
collaborative art form.
if you want to compare that to film, like because film really took off. Film was huge even before sound films, so that was like pretty early on. Like
Silent film, yeah.
it still was really really well, and then of course sound films revolutionized that. But video games, if you want to compare that with the home console and stuff like that, like as like the first thing that really skyrocketed that, then yeah, video games are basically they've been around for 40 years, maybe 50 years
Yeah.
if we're lucky. 40 years. And that's really new. That's really 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 new. That's
In the history of entertainment, and yeah,
We've-
exactly.
that's-
That's storytelling. It's very new.
that's reaching the 1930s and 40s for cinema. Like if you want to
Yeah.
compare where video games are now versus movies, that's the timeline you're looking at.
Well, even forget movies, right? Think of like novels and stuff like that. Like writing goes way beyond that. So
Well, writing though
like,
reached
yeah,
a point where writing the thing with the writing, and it's I think it's the lack of visual media. Writing kind of reached a point where it's not going to change much past what it is
and not that it needs to change, but I'm saying like it's been around
for a very
for literally ever. You know what I mean? So like in terms of storytelling, video games is one of the newest mediums out there.
Yep.
entertainment, right? Like music has obviously been around forever. So it does have this kind of shadow hanging over it. So I think
It's
too
still
when
the new
people
kid on
are
the block.
exactly. So I think also there isn't that same level of maybe
Well, it's
respect for the source material or willing to dig into it as much.
to make a
Like they get a
really
vague understanding, but not to really dig in there and understand it.
to make a
Not
really
all of them. I'm not trying to make a blanket statement. I'm just saying maybe some of them, because some of them seem to like it's not even close, dude. Like not even
to
close.
make a possible dangerous blanket statement or equivalency here. The only thing that I would say is reviled more than video gaming for storytelling would be things like YouTube,
Yeah,
Vine, and TikTok.
yeah,
And Vine doesn't exist anymore because it just didn't last. But again, if you look at specifically how people talk about YouTube and YouTube still, which is funny with how freaking popular that is,
yeah.
and TikTok, which are very viable places to tell stories and very viable places to tell stories. It's those are viewed lesser than video games because it is the newer kid on the block than
Whatever the
video
new
games.
kid is, yeah, you got to earn your stripes, right?
But then again, look at all you have to do to look at how successful it is or how good it is look at the main generation that is using that, which isn't our generation necessarily, but the generation underneath us. It's the same thing with video games. How often do you talk to your parents about video games?
Yeah, like never.
There's some,
Exactly. Yeah.
like my aunt is who got us into video gaming
Yeah.
because she taught it, like she had a Super Nintendo and an N64 all before we did, right? So I have that connection there, and I know some people whose dads they played computer games and stuff like
Hmm.
that. But for the majority of it, a lot of like my dad doesn't play computer games. My mom plays on her iPad at the most,
Yeah.
and that's about it. But if she didn't have that, she'd be doing crossword puzzles and word searches in a paper book.
Yeah.
So that's all it is for her. So video games are lost on them because they're not part of that generation, right? And that's where it's interesting because I guarantee you not. That is probably how my great grandparents felt about TV and movies.
For sure. Yeah.
Actually,
Like it all
probably
comes into it. Yeah.
because my grandparents grew up with TV. That was their whole revolutionary time. Was like TV came out and they would love watching TV. Same thing
Hmm.
because they used to sit around I guarantee when the radio happened, that generation before that's like
Yeah.
radio
What
shows.
goddamn
This is a
radio,
waste.
what the hell is this
Stop
shit?
wasting
Yeah.
your time and go work on the farm. Like
Go chop that lumber, boy.
so like really when it comes down to storytelling through, well, I mean,
Or even
through
just different
anything,
mediums of entertainment, right?
it is 100% a generational thing, and there is going to be a divide and a disconnect.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of hilarious to me at the end of the day. Like it is actually pretty funny because it's weird. It's just weird how passionate we get about stuff like that too.
Yeah, no doubt.
Because again, it's dude. I remember when TikTok came out, I was like, "This is the dumbest app in the world." Why would I? It's the same thing with Vine. It was like 3 years apart from each other. I'm like, Vine is stupid, and then I just kept watching Vines. And
Yeah.
then the same thing with TikTok, and then pandemic hit, and I'm like, well, I guess I'm on TikTok now because it's stupid. This is a joke. And then yeah, here I am. And yeah, and that's where I think again, man, I think it's the idea of there are so many different ways to tell stories. The question, I think, to bring it back to what we were talking about before, is how easily can you cross those stories or those storytelling devices?
Yeah.
Because I would not want to see a feature film about TikTok. I would not want to see a feature, like putting feature films on YouTube doesn't really work.
No.
It doesn't have the same experience.
Well,
You
no,
can,
because
but like,
each medium is unique in itself, right? And it's
yeah.
suited for different types of storytelling. And
But
that's
if you
where those
want to
adaptations do become challenging because you have to take something that's from a completely different medium and transform it so it's still recognizable and it still has like that same spirit and heart,
yeah,
but totally different medium, right? But still works in this new medium, which
well,
is
it's like
challenging.
it's not an adaptation at all. But like I remember watching a lot of movies growing up on YouTube in 10 parts in terrible quality.
Yeah.
But the thing is, that wasn't adapting the movie for YouTube.
No, that was just
That was.
literally putting a movie on YouTube
But could
in
you?
like
But could
10
you
parts.
imagine? Could you imagine if someone wanted to do an updated version of Jaws on YouTube in 10 parts?
Yeah.
I wouldn't watch that. I'd be like, no, this is stupid. I'll just go watch Jaws on Blu-ray. I don't need to see some people like do a worse version on YouTube. Like,
yeah.
and that's the like. I think that's the other thing too. When you're adapting something, there's always the risk of, is this going to be a worse version of the thing that I got that I already love?
Yeah.
Which has happened quite a few times. Like my favorite terrible video game movie is Super Mario Bros. It is the worst, in my opinion, it is like the worst adaptation
like
of video games ever.
It's pretty horrendous.
But I love it for how terrible it is. It is unrecognizably Mario.
It's so bad it's good kind of thing, yeah.
It's one of those things of like, you look to see the references. You're like, okay, this is like the most difficult game of hide and seek that I could possibly find.
Yeah.
But I love it. I love it. And did you hear about the fans who like took a bunch of deleted scenes and then did like a high resolution scan of a VHS?
No, I
deleted
didn't.
Scenes and they made like a super edition that's online.
That's hilarious.
And there are now petitions from like fans to like get this released on Blu-ray or DVD.
That's
and
pretty
like,
great.
I'm not gonna lie, if they release it on Blu-ray, I'd buy it. 100% I would.
You're just like, I'm down.
Dude, it is so bad. Did you watched it, right?
I saw parts of it.
Oh goodness, man, it is.
I couldn't get through the whole thing.
I don't blame you. It is so bad, but it is so enjoyable. But it's like, I can't think of another superhero, or not superhero. I can't think of another video game movie that is that level of bad.
Yeah.
Because most of the times they're just boring. Or they're not.
They're either
great.
boring or they're just they're not clicking. They didn't bring in the elements properly, or like, the other different examples we used, or sometimes they are just elements, bad, or they bring in elements that just like,
it's with a wink and a nod and like, hey guys,
this
did
is
you notice
a video game movie? It's like, bro,
did you see this thing? Like, I like that Resident Evil just kind of like gave up by the 5th one and just made it a video game where she has to go through different levels.
Pretty much, yeah.
It's just, like, well, the last one was like really just slow-mo all the time, but like here, now she's gonna have to literally level up. And
like the early Resident Evil movies, like I don't really fully remember them, but I'm being like, that wasn't terrible. Like, because there are video game adaptations out there that are like watchable. You know what I mean? Like, they're not
Sonic
fantastic, but they're watchable. There's some that are completely unwatchable. That's like, what is going on here? For me, it's Assassin's Creed. Like, I remember, like, I'm a big fan of that series. Like, I loved it since the first one came out. I love it since like the trailers of the first one. I was like, wow, this game looks awesome. So I'm totally invested in that, totally invested in the mythology and stuff. And then when you get to the Assassin's Creed movie, it was just like, what in the Sam hell am I watching here? Like, all like the real core elements of the thing, the film threw to the side.
Well, and
it didn't really focus on like human stories. It was more of like a scenario.
Well, it's such a waste of Michael Fassbender.
Dude, there was so many actually good performers in there that were just like doing nothing. What's that guy's? I'm trying to think of that guy's name. Big, either Scottish or Irish dude. He always plays a big redhead. I just saw him in another movie too recently where I was like, where the hell?
My mind's saying Brendan Gleeson, but I feel like that's very, very, very wrong.
No, I think you're right. I think you're right. I think you're right. Yeah.
Like, was he Mad Eye Moody in
Oh, yep. Totally that guy.
Wait,
yep.
what?
Yeah, he's in Assassin's Creed. So he's like playing. So
oh my goodness, he totally is.
So he's playing. Like, when I saw him in there and Michael Fassbender, I was like, okay, this has got to be somewhat decent, right? The guy's in there for like seconds. He does nothing. And then I think he killed himself. And I was like, what? Or he got killed by one of like the bad guys or something. It was like, the most like insignificant role. Like for sure, he showed up to set for maybe a day, maybe half, and went home. Like it was just,
But he's
why
like
did
top
you
build.
get him? Yeah, like what? Like he's so good. And Jeremy Irons is in there, and Marion Cotard, the French
Yeah.
lady. I never can say her name. I suck at French. I'm literally the worst. Um, like so you have top tier talent and performers coming in, but it's like the writing is bad. The freaking the actual direction and creation of the film was not great. There's a couple moments that's like, okay, that was pretty cool, but they're so far and few in between that it's just painful to actually watch.
See, and
Um,
that was me for
yeah.
Prince of Persia,
Mm.
because I was like, I was on board with the movie and I hadn't played the games yet, but I was like, yeah, yeah, this movie's great. And then the ending happened and it suddenly didn't matter. The entire and like I
Well,
get
we
that's
talked
part
about this too, but yeah, like that does happen in the game, right?
which like but I get
But
that for the game because you
the sequels represent like the consequences too.
but also with the game at least you actually physically
Did
go
it.
through the journey yourself.
Yeah,
So
you're
there's still a
interacting
sense of
with it.
accomplishment as opposed to like watching Jake Gyllenhaal struggle and not even that poorly. And then he just like, oh, and by the way, none of that mattered. And it's like,
None of that happened.
so
Reverse time.
I just watched 2 hours for nothing?
Yeah.
Oh, great. This is exactly why I go to movies, to watch 2 hours for nothing.
Nothing. So like it has taught me that even if some does have like top tier talent, it all comes down again to the writing and whoever is making that adaptation at the end of the day.
No, exactly.
Because talent can only take you so far, right?
Did you ever watch Rampage?
No, I didn't. I heard
I've
again,
heard that one's really fun.
not too bad.
Yeah.
And that's like a loose video game adaptation, right? Because like that game was pretty much you were a giant monkey like destroying stuff, so they added
Yeah,
story
like
to it, right? Which is a
exactly.
little
Like they're
different than taking a story and readjusting it, or
well, it's
taking
like if you ever
something that doesn't have story at all and adding story. That kind of
if you
works
ever
a
had
little
to
better.
make a if you ever had to make a Pac-Man game, you would have to make a story for it,
Yeah, exactly.
right? Like or a Pac-Man movie, which they've done a TV show for, which apparently isn't terrible.
Yeah. And it's the same
But
idea
like,
with like Lego and stuff, right? Because it's like, how do you make Lego? It's like, well, clearly Lego doesn't have a story. So you build a story around
arguably, Lego has several stories.
it, arguably.
As the movie says, it has endless stories because it's building
But
creativity.
everything is awesome.
Exactly.
So like, and it's great, right? Like it works really, really well. So as long as you have a really great story, adaptations work. But the problem is when you're getting video games that already have really, really great stories that were designed for that length and designed for that, sometimes they adapt it and they don't want to, and it's not even necessarily they follow the video game because that often happens in adaptations. They're like, this is a side story, or not like
Yeah.
they're not making one of that game. It's more in like the franchise. But they'll like just gut the franchise and what it's like, like again, the heart and the soul is kind of what matters at the end of the day of those stories.
Well, and I think me and you have talked about the reverse too before, where like a lot of times too, movies do not adapt into video games.
100%, man. Like it's just there's a lot of video game tie-ins to films that are just terrible.
The
Usually
first two
though, to be fair, those games are usually made in like 8 months kind of thing,
Because
like less
it's
than
like,
a
oh,
year.
quickly, let's just
It's like a real tight turnaround, so they're not usually great. One of the
the
really
only
good
ones-
ones was Wolverine Origins. It was actually almost better. Some would say it was better than the movie.
oh, like for X-Men Origins.
Yeah.
I never played that one. I got so turned off by the Wolverine X-Men game, like the one between one between 2 and 3.
Okay, I never
It
played
left
that one.
such a dude. That's how they explain why Nightcrawler wasn't in it, and why Iceman had his powers, or at least
nice.
that's what they said it was. What it
Yeah.
was is they killed off Nightcrawler for no reason, other than he wasn't gonna be in the next movie. So like, well, we gotta kill him off, and like Iceman's explanation of how he had his full ice powers in the third one was that he just had them in the game.
Yeah.
They didn't explain anything.
No, so usually video game adaptations are pretty terrible, and that's why you don't see them that often anymore. And
Like,
making video games has become more complicated than what it was back in those early like 2000s and stuff, where you could like pop out those like, video game adaptations real quick. Nowadays, like video games and for the technology and the level that people expect, like you can't turn that around that quick and still have
but
something quality. But
you
to
can
be
also
fair,
tell,
they made a Fast and the Furious game and it was horrendous as well. So,
but you can also tell that when they cared, because there were the Lord of the Rings games were
which
phenomenal,
were great. Yeah.
and the first two Spider-Man games were
Yeah.
also amazing.
Spider-Man
Like,
2 on the PlayStation 2 was like
dude,
it
even Spider-Man 1, like a lot of people don't talk
no, it
about it,
was
but
good, but
like
Spider-Man 2 took it to the next level. That's why
where
it's the
suddenly
more
open world,
popular
right?
one. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Where
remember playing
Spider-Man,
Spider-Man 1 at my buddy's house
it was
and like
hard.
everyone fell asleep and I'm still playing and I fell asleep swinging around the city. So like everyone woke up and Spider-Man's just like hanging just like just
Matt,
sitting
did
there
you kill
hanging.
Spider-Man?
Like, oh man, like you
But
just
like,
left him hanging. I was like, sorry guys, I fell
and
asleep.
then like the Lord of the Rings, it's funny because like the Fellowship of the Rings was a terrible game, but that's because it wasn't based off of the movie. They based it off the book, and like you have to do so much trivial stuff in the first bit that it's like impossible.
Yeah.
And then, but then they released the Two Towers and Return
Return
of
of
the
the
King,
King.
which are based off the game or
So
based off the
good.
movie.
Yeah.
Amazing. Everyone, people want remasters of that one. I'm on board for it too. If they release
They were
remasters,
great, man.
man, like I go back and play. I have them for
I
GameCube. I go
remember
back and play them quite
I
a bit.
remember playing those and like the Harry Potter games. Like
Yep,
the early ones were like really like top notch,
because they
like
cared.
tied in games. And you could tell, yeah, there was a lot of care. And obviously they'd been given a lot more time probably also to work on them
Yes.
over the
Well,
process, like because that makes a big difference too.
when you bring in the actual voice cast to voice the actor or voice the characters, that's huge.
It's a
That's
big
usually how
deal,
you can
yeah.
tell.
It's
Yeah,
usually
like
well, to be fair, they had the Iron Man game and they brought Robert Downey Jr. in for the cutscene. So,
yeah.
but
Um,
I actually bought like recently a bunch of those 360 early MCU games because I heard they're terrible, but I kind of want the experience for myself.
were they all pretty
And it's
terrible?
like they're not like they're bad, but like I'm like this is somewhat playable. The first Iron Man is pretty much unplayable if anything other than easy because there's so many things shooting you at the same time. It's like any other
But
difficulty, you're instantly dead. So it was like, okay.
but you're wearing armor.
Yeah, I know, right? But it was like it was crazy. But like really janky, like controls were bad. Like you could tell obviously he's made very rushed. The Captain America one wasn't too bad either, actually.
It's because Captain America is the best.
It wasn't too bad either. But yeah, like
Oh,
sometimes they
I
don't
actually
translate back to video games very well either.
unrelated. I forgot. I have a Captain America shield that I got like almost probably before I moved, like 10 years ago.
Really? That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was like a local sword shop. They made trash bin Captain America shields,
Oh,
and
nice.
like it's kind of dope. I found it like because we're packing up for the move, and I was like, it was beside Prosser's desk, and I'm like, oh,
I forgot I had this.
huh, I'm a nerd. Okay, all right. So this is who I am.
This works for me. This tracks.
Well, I guess this explains a lot, and I'm okay with this. But
Yeah,
here we go. Yeah, no, it was a weird thing to find, but that's the beauty of moving.
exactly.
Um,
But yeah, like like it's just like the transition between back and forth hasn't been overly successful for the most part. There are some exceptions.
and it
Um,
literally comes down to care, both
it literally
ways.
comes down to care and time and effort, and because yeah,
Like not
both put in a lot of work to. It takes a lot of work to adapt those things. But if you do it well, you can do it.
well,
You know.
that's the thing is the care needs to come from the studio. It doesn't need to come from necessarily the individual workers or the directors or anything like that. The care needs to come from the people who are funding these projects and realize, oh, this can't just be a quick cash grab.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, well, maybe that's why it works though. It's the same, those the Asylum movies, the ones where it's like you get transmorphers or like it's the titles that are like almost the title of a famous movie that they release because they know grandparents will buy it for their kids.
Accidentally kind of thing. Yeah,
Because
yeah,
it's like, oh yeah, this is that thing that the kids are talking about. It's the same. I
yeah.
guarantee you, a lot of the video game adaptation of like a movie adaptation of video games. No, at video game adaptations of movies are the same thing, where it's just a quick cash grab. It's the
Well,
idea of like,
100%, man.
oh well,
100%.
my
It's a
kid likes
marketing tool,
Iron
dude.
Man, so if they
It's a
buy the Iron
marketing
Man game,
it's a
like
marketing tool beyond anything, right?
100%.
Like it just adds to their
It just
marketing. Like,
it just leaves such a bad taste in my mouth. It's like, guys, do better.
can we please just do better? GoldenEye is another exception, right? Like that was a fantastic game for the
But then,
N64.
the remaster, the restore of it was terrible. Apparently,
Yeah, it wasn't that great.
because
Well, they
did they
like
replace Pierce Brosnan
with Daniel Craig.
which makes
Yeah.
no sense.
But then but it had gameplay of like what the kind of current Bonds were doing at that time, right? Like it wasn't really the same. It was
And,
actually
like,
quite different at the end of the day, but I didn't
honestly,
mind it. But
I'd like them to try it again. In all honesty, because it's one of those things of just. I would like the targeting system to be better because I will fully admit, as someone who's gone back to play the game, the targeting system when you're playing the story is
oh yeah,
annoying.
yeah, it's rough.
But when you're playing multiplayer, you don't care about that stuff.
No, you
Like,
just run up and shoot people in the face or slap them. Whoosh.
at the end of the day,
Slappers
you can,
only, baby. Slappers only.
the worst first-person shooter ever to exist with the worst targeting system, you could play with your friends and you'd still have a hoot.
Oh yeah.
Like that's just a given. But like, if they had updated the targeting and updated the skins, but then kept pretty much the exact same or same
Frame,
levels and
yeah.
same like it'd be fine. It's not that hard to do. But again, it's that idea that well, kids today aren't gonna know who Pierce Brosnan is. We gotta
Yeah,
update
yeah.
him and make him the
The new
current
James
Bond.
Bond. Yeah.
It's like no, you don't. People are gonna see James Bond and be like, hey, I want to play this game because it's
That's James Bond.
Like,
James Bond. The name's Bond. James.
but again,
Bond.
it speaks back to the whole lack of care. It's the same
Yeah.
thing as again the Super Mario Brothers movie. It's the same thing as the original Mortal Kombat movies. It's the same thing as like well, from what I've heard, the Street Fighter movies. It's the same thing, right? Like it's just
Yeah.
that lack of care because it's oh, this is a popular franchise right now.
It's yeah, lack of care and also lack of understanding, right? Like it does come down to like the studios to care. But it also comes down to like, the directors and the writers and everyone who's putting it together, right? Like there also has to be that sense of care and understanding
Just do
for
some research.
what's actually doing, right? And I think that's kind of what it's lacking. Or not even the research, but the understanding of why something is valuable. But I think like to
Understand the fans.
make them better overall, like I think it's just really a lot of the opposites that we're talking about, right? Like stay true to a lot of the elements that are there. Like you can make slight adjustments, but like for one example, the Animus in Assassin's Creed, right? Like in the games, it's like a chair that you sit in, right?
Yeah,
Kind of thing, or like a bench, or sometimes it's a bed, whatever. And then like you kind of like get not transported, but you relive your genetic memories through that. In the movie, it was like this weird ass robot arm that came down and like grabbed you, and everything you did in your genetic memory, you were physically doing. So anytime he jumped, they'd cut back to the arm lifting him up like out of the air.
and like why
And,
do you
like,
need that?
So, but like they're like, we did it to make it more cinematic because lying in the Animus isn't cinematic. But it's like, but you don't need to actually cut back to the present. Like you just stay in the past. Like that's how the game works. Like you're not playing the game and then looking at the guy laying in the bed. Like you just stay in the
Could you
past.
imagine?
You know what I mean? Like in the middle of a fight, it's like, oh shit, cut back to the guy laying in the bed. Oh, he moved his hand. Oh, you swung your sword. Like it would just be so painful. So the fact they did in the film, right? Like they just completely ignore the idea that this is literally like you're seeing this in VR or it's in your head or however it's working, depends on what game you play. But there is no cut back and forth. Like when you come out of it, you come out of it. When you're in it, you're in it. Like you didn't need to cinematically show that. So and that was a core element that was just like weird. It's like that's not really how any of this works or it makes sense that any of this is designed. Like it's
Yeah.
just odd. But that was an element that's like, listen, it's a very basic element to stay true to, but you decided to not, and it completely changes a lot of the context and how it works. Um, I think you got to focus. I think they need to focus more like on the human stories that are there and expand upon them, because that's kind of the strength of these games. A lot of these games nowadays, it's like, uh, especially PS4, like you have a lot of raw human stories, right? I find like a lot of or video game movies focus on like the video gamey aspects, right? Whether
Of the
it's the
action.
action, whether it's the corniness, whether it's like the over the top or whatever, the explosions, but like they miss the fact that like there's some real human stories, and older games aren't gonna always have that. So it's like you also have to create that. God of War is a perfect example, because the earlier games were just kind of like hack and slash,
Well, and that's the thing is
third
like
person far camera adventures, right?
I don't need a movie of Kratos yelling different gods' names,
But
like
like, but that, yeah, and that's kind of what like the first three games were, the first four, whatever. But then, what did they do for PlayStation 4?
Ares.
They completely transformed Kratos, the character, and the storytelling they were doing, and they focused on this more human element. Like they completely changed the series.
Well, they
Now
made
God
him
of War,
grow.
well, exactly. Now God of War is bigger than it ever was, and that's that same idea of transitioning from some of these games that don't have human stories, that don't have elements, and bringing them into cinema, right? Because you
And like
have to have those human stories for things to work, for people to care about these characters, to connect with them. And there's human stories there. It's just it's never dug into in video games, because it's usually about the gameplay.
and that's not
Um,
saying there isn't the human element to God of War, the first three. It just again it's overshadowed
it's overshadowed by everything else,
by the
right? And
hack
kind
and
of the
slash.
ridiculous level, like, but like, and that's what I'm saying. There's human elements there, but many of them need to be expanded upon. And when
Yeah,
they expanded on the human elements for God of War 4, or whatever you want to call it, like the PlayStation 4 version, it just completely changed the genre of that whole series. And it's an amazing game. So I think they really need to focus on those human stories and not the gameplay elements. Those aren't the important parts that need to be translated over. The important parts that need to be translated over are really the human stories. And I think maintain the soul of the story. Like that's got to be so important, to maintain the soul of the game, like the feel. Don't try and completely change it. If it's a lighthearted, joyful game, don't make it a dark, depressing movie. You know what I mean? It's like we talked about kind of in comics. Like, is the soul still there?
I
Because at
don't
the end
need
of the
broody Super Mario Brothers.
Well, exactly. And at the end of the day, I think, people are going to understand when it comes to a movie, yeah, you can't make a 30-hour movie, you know? Like, there's going to be a lot of things that get cut out, but that's your job to figure that out and still figure out how the soul of that game, what's it saying, what are the themes, how does that still carry on in my new version? And I think that's, again, one of one of the pitfalls as well. Like I don't think they properly carry over sometimes the effect in the soul and the emotion and the themes of video games. Again, it always usually comes down to those gameplay elements making a part of the film instead of the actual stories. But that's my own 2 cents. I mean, I don't make Hollywood films, so maybe I don't know, but I know from personal experience that like, yeah, when I'm watching these films after playing games, like I don't need it a direct one to one, but I want to feel the same. I want to feel the same
Yeah,
spirit.
you
Like
need that.
Uncharted, you need to have that adventure. You know what I mean? Like that mystery, very Indiana Jones kind of style. For Assassin's Creed, it is about like the parkour, the speed, the assassinations, this mysterious cult of assassins, this mysterious cult of Templars. In that game, it was just like, and obviously like the historic locations a big part, main part. In that movie, a lot of it was like Abstergo gray rooms, like talking. It was just like anytime they win the past, the movie was pretty freaking good. Like as far as the action goes, but then they keep halfway cutting into the animus, and
Well,
then
it's
they pull you out of the animus after like 10 minutes and be like, "And we're back to the grade room for 20. Have fun." And I was like, "Bro,
when
you're
when
killing
one
me."
of when probably the best video game movie ever is an original IP, that's a problem.
Yeah,
Because I think we could both agree that like Wreck-It Ralph is the best video game movie.
That's pretty solid. Yeah.
Like,
Well, there's a difference between video game movie and movies that are about video games,
well, like, and
right?
that's the thing. It's like it's both though. It's both because it has how many video game characters in it.
Yeah, but it's not exactly adaptation of those characters. But
Well, there's adaptations of those characters, but again, but they're done in such a way that it works for the film.
like, it's more cameos. But like, I get what you're saying.
Like, but again, it's you would think that you would think that well, because like what other movies about video games are there out there? There'd be like Ready Player One, Wreck-It Ralph.
Gamer, that one with Gerard Butler.
I don't think that was a good movie.
No, I didn't say it was good. I just said it was. You got Freeman or Freeman that's coming up with Ryan Reynolds or Free Guy or whatever the hell it is.
Like Scott
There's not a
Pilgrim is
lot
kind
of them, but
Scott Pilgrim's a weird mix because it's like a comic book adaptation, but also like feels like a video game movie.
yeah.
But like, so that one is its weird own thing. But when you think about movies that are about video games, a lot of times those ones are a lot stronger than the adaptations, and that I think I still think that's weird. That's weird to me.
I think it's a mindset, man. I think it's like what gets focused on. Like when you're creating a new IP, like there's a difference of care that you're putting into. Like you're making it for film, straight for film.
But then how come with
You don't have to
superheroes-
really translate all those things.
How come with superheroes and comic films, still the adaptations of the comic characters are stronger than the more original ideas, you know? You know what I'm talking about? That makes sense?
Oh, then like original superhero type
Yeah.
things or what?
Yeah.
I don't know.
How
I
come
think
that
maybe
hasn't
because
ever taken
comics
off?
have been around a little longer too, right? Like talking about length and stuff, and infiltrating the cultural zeitgeist. Comic books have been around a lot longer too, right? They're a bit more iconic than a lot of the video games. Like, not saying video games aren't iconic, but like Superman has been around for a hell of a long time. You know, Batman has been around for a hell of a long time. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have a reason for it. Like, I just think it's comes down to like a mindset and the attitude looking towards video games and the quality of storytelling. I think that's being assumed that video games have. Like, but I don't know. Like it changes more and more every day as more video games become more engrossed in storytelling and like they have the gameplay features, but at the core is like a human story. Like The Last of Us is a perfect example. Like the second one, dude, is like if there were Oscars for video games, it would be that. You know, like it's on that level of storytelling. Like there's some real deep shit in there. And that's why I think a lot of gamers didn't like it either, because it was just like almost too much. Like it was just on a level that most people who are playing video games aren't quite ready to.
You're making me feel things and think, and I
You're
don't
making
like
me
that.
like think beyond something I want to, right?
Stop pushing me to be a better person.
Well, it wasn't even
I hate
that. It was
this.
just, and that's not really game. I don't think that pushes you to be a better person at the end of the day. But like a lot of people were just, I know one of the things was like, wow, Ellie is not the same character in this game that she was in the first game. It's like, okay, because let's break this down from a storytelling element. Because I get where you're coming from, that you feel like the character is different in the sequel, and that's bullshit. It should be the same character or whatever, right? Because that's good storytelling.
No, because
But
characters
this is
grow and change.
But this is the mindset, because video game characters sometimes don't always change from game to game, right? A lot of them, you know, have that static feel to them. But Ellie changed like significantly, because in the first game she was 14, and like she loved comic books, and she was a little kid, but she was always swearing, and she, you know, all this kind of stuff, and she was very fun and lighthearted.
Yeah.
The next game takes place 5 years later, and like she's gone through a traumatic experience, and then she had another super traumatic experience that literally like you look at it, this like a kid growing up from 14 to 19 in a post-apocalyptic like zombie land is not going to be
Yeah.
like, wow, I'm still this happy-go-lucky person. Like people literally, like she has seen people murdered that she cares about right in front of her. Like that's going to change a person. Like they
100%.
ignored all the human elements that would actually cause change, because what the story a lot was, it's like it wasn't like here's just another good old adventure. It was like here's the things that created her change into who she is now, and this is what she is. But people were like, they didn't like that idea of it. Um, they just wanted her to be the same old Ellie, but she wasn't, and a normal person wouldn't be. So it's just kind of like it's on that level. Like it's just very, very human. It won a lot of awards though, obviously for its storytelling. Just some of the fans weren't like, fans of it. I loved it. I thought it was great.
I
Damn
still
near a
haven't played
masterpiece,
either
man.
of
Like
them.
if a video game could get an Oscar, like that is one that probably would.
I still need to play them both, but
Dude, you
new,
seriously should, Max. If you like Uncharted,
new
like
house,
same
new house.
new house, new experiences, dude.
Well, it's the same studio. Like the problem that when I tried playing it, I tried actually playing Last of Us before Uncharted,
Yeah.
and now the shooting is very similar, except for one very important element: the ammo.
Yeah, the ammos.
Now
This is not a
I
run.
was I was a terrible shot.
Yeah.
I'm much better now, so I actually have a chance of survival. And
Well,
also, I've gotten better at sneaking around too, which I was also terrible
and
at.
that's the thing with like The Last of Us, right? Like it's not a guns blazing thing. Like there'll be moments where maybe you do have to get into these firefights, but it's more about trying to, conserve your ammo. Like cuz you'll get some, but it isn't going to be like it's not Uncharted levels of ammo, right? Not even close. But and that Last of Us, like that's again one film and one series that's coming out for who's doing The Last of Us? Is it Netflix?
I don't even
Amazon?
know.
I can't remember. One of them is doing the
HBO?
last HBO, I think. I think it's HBO. Um nah, god damn it, now I'm gonna have to get HBO. But they're doing the Last of Us series with Pedro Pascal, right? So he's pretty much playing again, like I said, the Mandalorian looking after a little kid, except it's a zombie apocalypse. He's playing the same damn character, pretty much. But like that story has some serious storytelling potential. But if they
Well, I
focus
mean,
on gameplay elements, but that's also a game that has a lot of narrative, so there should
if
be a
it's
lot for
just an
them to take
entire
from.
episode, oh no, actually, I started saying that and I thought about it. Like, if it's an entire episode of them just sneaking around, but like, honestly, an entire episode where they don't say a single word because they are trying to get past some of the zombies
Would
would
be pretty
be,
tense. It'd be like a
if done
quiet place
correctly,
episode. Yeah.
if done correctly, it could be one of the most compelling episodes of TV in history.
Yeah. So like there's a lot of games that are movies and excuse me, series. My voice is starting to go on me. There's a lot of these series and movies that have a lot of potential. Like the Uncharted film, I think there's potential there. As long can they nail the spirit of it? Like that's the important part when it comes to those ones. And tell this great story of a young Nathan Drake, and does he feel similar to the one from the video game? Like,
Well,
is
and
there that
not having
connection, right?
Mark Wahlberg with the mustache for Sully is a huge.
Like, that's a big thing. Yeah, the
That's a
mustache
big
is a
mistake.
pretty iconic part, right?
You
Like,
need it.
that's Sully's thing. Um, Ubisoft is doing a Division movie with Jake Gyllenhaal. Somehow he keeps getting attached to Ubisoft films. Again, God of War film that's apparently getting worked on. Assassin's Creed, I think was it last year already now? Announced their Netflix TV series, which I'm hoping is better than the movies. Like, come on, man. Come on, be better. Halo series we talked about. There's a Borderlands movie getting made right now. Which,
Yeah.
as long as they keep that wacky craziness of it. And they got, again, there's a lot of talented people attached to these things. Tomb Raider 2 is coming. Sonic 2 is coming. So there's a lot of things that got potential. We'll have to see how they play out. But I think if they can nail even just one of them or two of them, they're going to start figuring out how to make these things. Like, because I look at it very much like the comic ones, right?
Yeah. Well, and Sonic
Like
was
once
a good adaptation.
Like
Like
Sonic was, yeah, I haven't seen it,
it
so I
was
can't say yes or no. I
Sonic
guess,
was
but
really fun.
from what I
As a
hear,
Sonic fan, I like it. The second one, we're getting Knuckles, and I'm very excited about that.
I heard Jim Carrey was fantastic.
Oh, Jim Carrey is very enjoyable. Um, Sonic felt like Sonic. Like Sonic the character
Yeah,
felt like Sonic. There are a couple things where I don't think it's gonna age that well, just because of like some of the references that it makes and stuff.
sure.
Like was what we talked about with like a couple weeks ago with like when you make modern references in your films, that definitely dates your product.
Right.
So you want to be careful on that. And I think that's going to be the one thing that holds it back. But I think for video game movies, it was an important step, especially them listening to the backlash that was the design of Sonic. Because I
Yeah,
feel
that was
like
pretty like scary as fuck. Like, dude, that was scary as hell. I was like, oh boy. Um, but yeah, like I think there's a lot of potential. If they nail a couple of them, it'll be like the MCU, right? Like once you get the momentum, once you get things rolling and stuff like that, right? Like once they start nailing X-Men and Spider-Man
yeah, but I
and
feel like
came into the MCU, like once you get that momentum, it's like then there's something there. Doesn't mean everyone's gonna do it always perfectly.
we're still going to run into the
Like
DC
you're still
problem.
gonna run into like some of the DC issues. You're still gonna
Oh,
run into fan force stick or whatever, right? Like
yeah,
there's still gonna be those things that happen. But I think if we can nail a couple of these, it'll build momentum and people will start figuring out, oh, this is how we need to focus on them. And the solution really will be like, oh, just make a good make a good movie, man.
make something good.
Which sounds simple, but like obviously incredibly difficult task. Like
Yeah, it's not as easy as
incredibly
people
difficult
think.
task. But it comes down to again, like any good films start with really great foundations, right? Without those foundations, you're already kind of floating in the water.
No, exactly.
So, yeah, I think yeah, we talked about why they're bad. We talked about how they can improve, and what films have potential. But I think I think it has the potential to be a really big genre. It just needs to get there. They just need to keep pushing. But we'll see how it turns out. As soon as one's a blockbuster, man, we're gonna be on the right path.
Yeah.
I hope it's Last of Us. I'm gonna go see that movie or that show. God damn, it's a show. It's not even a movie.
Gotta
If
be a
HBO's
great-
making it, man, it should be pretty sick. And I really like Pedro Pascal.
Oh, he's great. He's like the best part in anything that I watch.
And he's a very different human being than like Joel, but I'm okay with it. It's like, hey, you're adding talent to this thing. I'm good with that. Like he doesn't need to be exactly Joel, but again, the spirit, the characters. Because Joel's like a Texan, and he taught like I don't know if they'll. Well, I guess they could make Pedro Pascal a
Yep.
Texan.
We'll get to see more of his range, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. It'll be a different story for sure. Anyway,
Time for a question of the day.
I think it's time for a question of the day.
All right, mine. I don't know if I think this is the exact opposite question that you asked last week.
Cheater.
What is a video game franchise that you absolutely never ever want to see translated into a movie?
Never want to see as a movie.
Yes.
Cuckoo, choo. There's honestly like a lot of them just in general, like, because it's like, man, this is pretty awesome by itself. Like, I don't know if you'd want to like throw that thing out there because video game movies are not always great. Let me think. I don't know, man. I really, really don't know. Maybe Fortnite. Like I don't need to see a Fortnite movie. I
Yeah,
guess
I can agree with
you
that.
know what I mean. But like the thing for me is like the reason I want video game adaptations to work and work well is I want to be able to share with more people like the joy I get out of these, right? Because for me, again, I play a lot of single player games. Like I will dip
Yeah.
into multiplayer, and I've been playing a bit more multiplayer recently just for the social aspect. And I'm getting hyped for Halo again, so I'm jumping back into Halo to like get like let's go, man. Because Halo Infinite comes out this year, it's gonna be sick as hell. But hopefully, so they don't F it up.
Like the last couple.
Like, well, yeah, there's good elements and there's bad. They need to nail both elements this time. You need to nail the campaign and the multiplayer, and you have to nail it. Not like that was okay. Like it's gotta be great, man. There's an expectation there for that caliber of game. Um, but yeah, like I think like most of them, I kind of want to have an adaptation. Like I always want a really good one, obviously, because I want to share those stories that I get to experience, right? Because it's like I can't talk to my wife about Assassin's Creed or Halo or Last of Us or like you can tell them, but you can't like how do you condense like that 20, 30, 40 hour story into
Yeah.
something they can understand and be like, wow, that's actually really interesting, you know? Um, and like that's a tough challenge, and they'll never be able to experience because they'll never put their hands on their controller and actually go play it, right? Like that's the thing. Like so the one thing about movies is it brings some of these stories to more people, to a wider audience. But it's useless if it's done like shit. You know? Like it's gotta be good. So there's not too many games that I play that'd be like, I would not want to see this made into a film. I never want to see them made into any like I never want to see any of the franchises I love made into shitty films. But if they're gonna be good, then like yeah, let's try it out. Except and of course there's just yeah, like I don't need a Fortnite film. But to be honest, I'm pretty sure that'll come at some point or another. It's too big of an IP for them to not make it.
Unfortunately.
But the good thing about Fortnite is though, it may be great because it doesn't really have a narrative to it. So they may be able to craft something there.
I think it would work better as like a kids show, like an animated show.
Maybe. I think Fortnite would actually be pretty funny as like an adult one, because you got like the kid kind of animated style, but it's like
I
adult
feel like
humor.
I feel like you'd have to hit
That'd be
that
pretty good.
balance with like hidden adult humor and because again kids are gonna watch it
Sure,
for the
yeah.
fun of
If
it,
it's
right?
Fortnite, they're gonna go. You're right. You're right. What about you?
There are several. There are several. Tetris is a big one. I never want to see a Tetris movie because that is the stupidest idea I have ever heard.
Why do I feel like there is one?
They were
Every
no,
time
they
we
were
say something,
talking
I'm like,
about
I
one.
feel like I've heard these things. Yeah.
They were talking about it, and I haven't heard anything recently, but it is the dumbest. Why would you make Tetris the movie? That is stupid. It's about pieces falling down. Like it's gonna be some. Oh, but guys, it doesn't matter what shape you are. You'll always fit in
Fit.
just
Yeah,
right. And it's like,
yeah,
shut up!
yeah.
No, you've never played Tetris then.
That's not how
Um,
Tetris works.
Crazy Taxi would be another one I wouldn't want to see. Like, I don't need to see a movie about people driving taxis crazily.
Crazy.
Um,
Fast and the Furious Taxi Edition.
basically. Um, The Sims. I would never need to see a Sims movie. Or Sim City. Roller Coaster Tycoon does not need a movie either. Like there are a lot of these kind of games that just like they do not need to be touched, but I could see at some point some producer being like, "Let's adapt Roller Coaster Tycoon.
Yeah, exactly.
It's about some crazy guy building a theme park."
Yeah.
Actually, The Sims would be kind of funny as like a murder mystery where just like people are just dying randomly from being left in pools or random fires starting.
Yeah, for sure. That's
Essentially,
like
it's like
Sims,
Final
man.
Destination.
Yeah. It's like, why did this bush just appear around me? Oh my god, now it's on fire. What the hell? Like,
But like there,
dude,
like, there
actually,
are,
that'd be pretty funny.
but there are several. I think it'd be funny as a sketch, but as a full movie, I think it would be.
Yeah, no, it'd probably make a better YouTube video.
And that's where like at the end of the day, there are more. I think, in my opinion, there are more video games to not be adapted than to be adapted.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Like, especially when I get to like apps and stuff like that. Because you imagine Flappy Bird the movie, or like, well, Angry Birds the movies.
They did
Why?
that, yeah.
Why does that exist? That's so dumb. Kids love it apparently, so I can't say too much. But yeah,
You're not wrong. At least
Like,
I wouldn't
it's-
say so.
and that's kind of my thing on it. Is there's a lot of movies that just that don't have a story but don't need to have a story because at the end of the day, that's what it is. There's some that would be fun to have stories to them, but other ones like
Sure.
I know a lot of people want Legend of Zelda brought to the big screen. I don't want to see it at a big screen, not because I'm not a fan. Like I don't play them.
Mm.
I'd like to play them because, especially as I've gotten older and appreciate video games more, I'd like to give them a crack again. But I think the backlash from the fans, because everyone has such a different idea of what Legend of Zelda is,
Mm.
would not be worth any endeavor of trying to interpret Legend of Zelda into the big screen.
Yeah,
Because,
there's
like,
Zelda's been around for a long time. It's one of those
you,
ones that are, and everyone's really passionate about like whatever version they like the best.
one, like, there's a huge divide in the fandom. Does Link talk or no?
Yeah.
Like, that is one of the biggest debates that I have heard for adapting Legend of Zelda. Is like, do you have a protagonist that doesn't say anything? And, like,
Yeah.
people realize that like Link does talk in the game. There are jokes that he doesn't talk, but he does talk. But he's also you, so you're getting talked to most of the time.
And yeah, exactly.
So it's
People
weird
like
when people get
people like to like dig in on like stupid topics. I find all the time. Like one of the biggest discussions in Halo is like people being like sprint or no sprint, like for the multiplayer, right? Like it's
yeah.
on like freaking all the time. I see that shit, dude, all the time, and
Well,
it's
that's
like, listen, that's the evolution of games. Like I'm going back and I'm playing Halo 2 and 3 on multiplayer right now, and like it's there's a different level of there's a difficulty to it, but there's also just like the pacing of the match isn't as like
isn't as
quick,
intense.
right? Like because
Yeah.
nowadays they've all a lot of these games have evolved to be much quicker. You got to react faster. You got to get in there quick. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you have to be a bit more on your toes. Whereas Halo was more methodical back in the day, and I think all games were back in the day.
100%.
Which was which was okay and okay for their time, but I'm like, holy man, sometimes it just feels so slow. Or
Well, it's like
or you like you'll do things to get out of the way, like try and like dodge or something, but then you're like, oh wait, that's not a component that exists. So I think taking away sprint would just be silly at this point. It's like it's just part of the evolution of it, right?
well, it's even looking at another debate I hear about Halo all the time is like, do you ever see Chief's face?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, well, if you're doing a live action adaptation, I think it depends. It depends on the story that you're telling.
Depends on the context. Yeah.
It depends. There's probably a good chance. Like I know Prosser says, if you're going to show his origins, you need to see his face when he's a kid.
Yeah.
You just never see it when he's an adult. Like as soon as he puts the helmet on, you never see it again.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, does that matter? In the video game, it matters because, again, you are Chief.
Mm-hmm.
That's why you never see his face, because you can put your face on that character.
Spider-Man aspect.
But at the end of the day, when it comes to storytelling, especially in movies, you need to see a character's eyes a lot of the time to connect.
I agree with that. Like, I agree with that, and I don't. I think it can be used as a like, Mandalorian's the perfect example of that, right? Like,
True.
how the actor, like, you could like how they emoted, because like sometimes it was Pedro Pascal, sometimes it was just whoever was on set that day. Like he wasn't always on set for every time or whatever, but like the emoting that happened through the helmet was impressive, right?
But then how much stronger were those scenes when we did get to see his
But
face?
that's the thing, right? And that's what I mean. Like when it comes down to storytelling, it's all about the context. If you're going to deny something, there's also got to be a payoff, right?
Yeah.
If you're going to create a tension there, oh, he can't show his face, there has to be a release of that tension.
No, and I agree.
Yeah. But like for me, yeah, it wouldn't be a big deal either way. Like again,
Like,
I would
long as the
prefer
movie's
if they
good.
I prefer if they use it in a significant way, right?
Yeah.
Like if you use it in the right way, fine. If you're just doing it willy-nilly, you just taking his helmet off every 10 seconds.
Well, 'cause
then
then
that's
that's
what the
also-
movie is, I guess, and whatever.
That's
but
also been a big debate is what race he is, and it's like, does it
he's
matter?
He's a white guy.
Does
There's not
it
even
matter
there's
though?
Yeah, but there's no debate. Like it's in the books. Like he's a little ginger kid. Like, He's super
That explains
white.
so much more about his character. I didn't know he was ginger, but now I understand Master Chief so much more.
Well, I'm pretty sure he was ginger or brown. I can't remember, but I'm pretty sure it was like red hair. I'd have to go back and read the books, but I'm pretty sure that's what it was. Cause I was
Him
like,
being a redheaded stepchild just makes it better in my
what
opinion.
was it? He wasn't even a stepchild, man. He was just taken from his home.
Oh, I know. Oh, I know.
Yeah.
Oh, I. And
Oh.
that's just even better.
The fact that he knows great, but like, yeah, it's just those kind of funny things, right? It's just, but once he has the helmet on, who cares, right? Like, but again, make it impactful. How do we get to this
Exactly.
topic? Anyway,
I mean, I just asked what video game adaptations you didn't want to see, and I answered, and you were like, they're all good, and I'm like, no, they're not. Listen to
no,
my
I didn't say like they're
examples.
all good. I just said I don't know what stories that I play that I would say like I don't want this. You know, like I'm
Pong the
getting
movie.
into more like variety of games again. Because I used to play like a huge variety. Then for a long time, like I've just played a lot of single player, narrative driven games because that's the experience I want. You know,
Well, it's like
now I'm starting to expand my horizons again and putting in more work in different types of games because I'm like I'm loving what I'm seeing out there. And I'm like, nah, yeah, no, I'll just start trying out these different experiences.
word,
So,
my dude.
but I meant like more of the narrative stories. Like there's a lot of them that I love that I'd be like, I wouldn't want anyone not to experience this.
True.
You know,
That is fair.
that
I
kind
can
of thing.
support that.
But
All
anyway,
right.
yeah, I think that's it.
I guess that's another episode of A Feast of Films. Matt, where can the good people find you?
If you loved this conversation about video games, well, you're gonna love my podcast because it's way more energetic than this. Because I'm really tired now. This is technically the third podcast I record tonight. So I'm just like,
Hooray.
seriously, guy, I've been almost talking for like 10 hours, dude. I took a little break for supper
Getting a little tired?
in a little bit. I've been talking quite a bit today.
You're just not going to talk at all tomorrow.
No, man, my voice is gonna be dead tomorrow, which my wife, I'm sure, will mind. She'll be like, "Oh, good." But
Finally,
yeah,
peace.
but yeah, my podcast is a little different. Smaller timeline, trying out different things, and it's just me by myself talking about video games. It's called Gaming Night Radio. They were all about celebrating the best of games and calling out the worst because there is some nasty stuff too, like microtransaction, like predatory microtransactions, and a lot of manipulative stuff and developer abuse, like just tons of crap in the video game industry that needs to just be spoken about and talked about, just even to educate and make people aware. But yeah, reviews, discussions, opinion pieces, news, we got it all. So come on by Gaming Night Radio on any of your podcast services, except Apple, because they're kind of dicks. And I haven't got up there yet. But yeah, and you can find me at Twitter at GK Radio Man. Ethan, where can they find you?
Hey, you can find me at my usual places of Ethan R. Hill on Instagram and Ethan R. Hill on YouTube. And you can also find Damned Rights, the feature film that Prosser and I made, on realhouse.org.
Cool, dude.
All right. Well, that has been another episode of A Feast of Films. I'm Ethan R. Hill, and with me, as always, is...
Ayalew.
Have a good night, everybody.
So long.
Bye-bye.
Toodaloo.
I guess it could also be daytime that you're listening this to. So have a good week. Peace.
Peace.